following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Hello. The character of the Patriot, if you will, the men, as you can think back in World War II, who charged up Mount Suribachi and stuck the American flag on top of the hill, they were patriots. The girl with visions in history who led the French people in their revolt, that was Joan of Arc. These were patriots. But we can find much more prosaic, different kinds of examples of patriots who have been immortalized in the arts. What about the people who signed the Declaration of Independence? In this painting, by what they did, by bringing this document into reality, they achieved their immortality. General Cornwallis, surrendering here, in that great moment in history when our country emerged, also achieved immortality. A patriot for the other side, if you will. Alexander Hamilton, a statesman who, in his thinking and writing, helped shape the policies which have governed this nation. George Washington, the father of this country, the man who led it as its first president. And last but not least, the man of the people, Andrew Jackson. But these have been patriots of a kind here immortalized in the graphic arts. What if we take a strange kind of patriot, William Billings, who was born in Boston in 1746. He was a patriot not in the classic sense of the term. Let's examine this man and see what kind of a patriot he was. We've discussed patriots who have jumped up on hills and stuck American flags in the ground, great patriots, great characters. But what could you ever say about a man who would tie two cats' tails together and then write down some music as they scream their cat chorus? What kind of a man who would rush hither and yon through the hillside in Massachusetts and get choruses together and coach them on their singing? Is a patriot. What kind of a man who would go into the sanctity of the church and bring in a cello because he said, listen, this chorus doesn't sing in tune, so that cello is just going to keep them in tune nicely there. That was William Billings. But God, how does one describe this poor man? This poor disfigured soul, this man, blind in one eye, a withered arm, a gimpy leg, dragging himself around, a man with such incredible vitality inwardly that it was almost inconceivable. He would talk to the air. He wrote furiously on leather. Why leather? He was a tanner by trade. He was also a musician. He couldn't escape himself, but a patriot nonetheless, a great patriot. The vitality of his music was something not just relegated to the fact that one could say, oh, he just felt it that way. He took one of the great traditions of England, the Fuguing tune, wherein instead of the nice four-square hymn where with great strength all voices enter now, he would have them one voice enter, followed by an entrance in another voice, and an entrance in another voice. And this man was so proud of what he could do, why he wrote and wrote and wrote about his Fuguing tune.
My fuguing pieces shall be 20 times more powerful than the old slow tunes, each part striving for mastery and victory, the audience entertained and delighted, the mind surprisingly agitated and extremely fluctuated, sometimes declaring for one part and sometimes for another. Now the solemn bass demands their attention, next the manly tenor, now the lofty counter, now the volatile treble, now here, now there, now here again. Oh, ecstatic! Rush on, ye sons of harmony. Sing to me, O my creation.
This poor, pathetic figure of the revolutionary period, he really suffered madly. Devoutly religious, he somehow in this revolutionary time tried to tie his religiosity to the situation. The British were all over. They were besieging places. How could he write? How could he compose? He tore through his Bible. Shema, England, listen. Shema, Eretz, hear, O earth. He was really trying to somehow equate the two. How does one take the Bible, which is the core of his very being as a composer and as a man of God? Aside from the fact that he was a tanner, he still was a man of the cloth. And how do you tie the two together? He struggled over this lamentable situation, constantly trying to find a way out, lamenting his own lot.
Oh God, the British have occupied Boston and I am in distress. Help me. You write, dear God, so beautifully. Show me to seek thy words that I may help our people in this dark times. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. What can I say? What can I say? Yes. By the waters, by the rivers of Watertown, we wept. We wept when we remembered thee, O Boston. Forbid it, Lord God, that those who have sucked Bostonian breasts should thirst for American blood. Lead on, Lord. Show me the way. Clear my eye, my only eye, that it may seek thy words to help our people. Here in Jeremiah, a voice was heard on the bare heights, the weeping and pleading of Israel's sons. Let's see. A voice was heard in Roxbury, which echoed through the continent, weeping weeping for thee, O Boston, because of thy danger. More words, Lord, more words. Because they have perverted their ways, they have forgotten the Lord their God. They have forgotten thee, but I shall not. If I forget thee, yea, if I do not remember thee, then let my tongue forget to move and forevermore be silent. Let horrid jargon split the air and rend my nerves asunder. Let hateful discourse greet my ear as terrible as thunder. Let harmony be banished hence, and consonance depart. Let dissonance reject her throne and forever reign in my heart.
impact of the infusion of biblical writing, paraphrased, if you will, as in the Lamentation of Boston, was an immense, powerful tool for Billings. In addition, the dynamic writing of his fuguing tunes also carried great dramatic impact. But it was when Billings returned to that old form of the hymn that he captured a whole colonial nation in his hands. He wrote a hymn, Chester, and in that simple, square-like hymn, he united a whole colonial group of people together into one of the greatest revolutionary hymns ever composed and ever heard in the times, the great hymn Chester. When he first put together his first collection of songs, he had a man filled with pride, this nut, if you will, this man who, in talking to the incorporeal air all around him, in writing down his own thoughts in prefaces to his first edition. But enough of my words. Listen to William Billings. Listen as he prepares, as he suffers with the great joy of his first creation.
Oh, how my foolish heart doth beat and throb with tumultuous joy. With what impatience did I wait on the bookbinder while he was stitching the sheets and putting on the covers. With what ecstasy do I snatch this yet unfinished book and pressing it to my bosom with rapturous joy, how lavish am I in my encomiums on this first offspring of my own numbskull. Welcome. Thrice welcome, thou legitimate heir of my brain. Go forth, my little book. Go forth and immortalize the name of thy author. May your sails be rapid, and may you speedily run through 10,000 editions. May you be a welcome addition in all households. And what will add tenfold to thee, oh, my Reuben, my firstborn, the beginning of my strength, the excellency of my dignity, and the excellency of my power.
The excellency and strength of Billings was not just limited to the hymn, that great monolithic structure. If you think on the little canon, the little round, if you will, like three blind mice, where one line follows the other line, each voice entering and singing exactly what the voice did before, you find one of the simplest forms. But to infuse in such a simple form the incredible, towering, musical architectural structure, so to speak, an architectonic structure of when Jesus wept, there is genius. And when you hear this canon, this simple little work, When Jesus Wept, you'll have some idea of the genius of this man. But he was a man who was, aside from the fact that he had a great deal of pride, was always being critical of himself. He couldn't stand some of the things that he had written afterward, and he just almost flagellated himself, verbally mostly with Billings, but he was marvelous verbally at flagellation, just literally tearing into his flesh in terms of criticism. How could I have written this? How could I have written that? But he, better than anyone, can tell you, in his own critical terms, how he tore himself apart, criticizing his own writing.
Kind reader of this diary, no doubt you do, or ought to, remember that about 8 years ago, I published a book entitled The New England Psalm Singer, etc. And truly, a most masterful and inimitable performance I then thought it to be. You may recall I spoke of it as my Reuben, my firstborn. But, to my great mortification, I soon discovered it was Reuben in the sequel, and Reuben all over. For, as stable as water, it did not excel. Well, since I have begun to play the critic, I will go through with my criticisms and endeavor to point out its beauties as well as its deformities. It has been judiciously observed that certain of the pieces in this book are not so ostentatious as to send forth their own praises. In fact, it has been observed that the more they are sounded, the more they are abased. After impartial consideration, I soon discovered that many of these pieces were not worth my printing or your inspection. Therefore, in order to make you ample amends for my former intrusion, I have selected and corrected several of the pieces that were most approved of in that book, and have added several new ones, which I think to be very good tunes, very good ones, very good ones.
said of Billings can be said that he was an American patriot, a man suffused with an independent spirit, a desire to follow up to a point, but then be himself, something I think we can say feels like us as Americans. And he wrote this, and he spoke it to himself as he conjured up his own thoughts about writing an independent thought.
To all musical practitioners, perhaps it may be expected by some that I might be able to say something concerning the rules for composition. To these I answer, nature is its own dictator. All the hard, dry, studied rules of composition will not enable any person to compose an air, any more than the bare knowledge of the 24 letters and strict grammatical rules will qualify a scholar for composing an air or a piece of poetry. It must be nature. Nature must lay the foundation. Nature must give the thought. I have studied several authors' works on composition and find that the strictest of them make some exception. For example, they say that 2 octavos or 2/5 may not be taken together rising or falling unless one be major and the other minor. But rather than spoil the air, they will allow the breach to be made. This allowance gives great latitude to young composers. They may plead, if I am not allowed to transgress the rules of composition, I will certainly spoil the air and cross the strain that fancy has dictated. For my own part, as I don't think myself confined to any rules laid down by any that came down before me, neither do I think, were I to pretend to prescribe such rules, that any who comes after me were anyways obligated to adhere to them any further than they should think proper. So, I think it is best that each composer should be his own learner. Therefore, for me to dictate or to pretend to prescribe such rules for others were not only very unnecessary, but also a very great piece of vanity.
To be treated with the feet of the best, with the feet of the best. And since we all agree, except the harmony, the obvious harmony, he refers to the rest.